Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some and peace out to the rest of you. You know who it ain't and who it is. It ain't your boy, it's your man's. The blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man on social media. Signing black in and shining again, asking you to hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. Um, I'm not going to wait for many of y'all to jump in, and I don't even know if I'll be on here that long, but I'll just get right to it. Jeannie Mai said maybe in 2016, 2017, don't know exactly when, but I don't remember exactly when. Jeannie Mai said that black men were good as a side dish. Now, I waited days for uh, Jeannie Mai to respond to anybody else's critiques of her or Jeezy to say anything about it before I did. I waited days because you can react to something that someone says one day and the next day it doesn't even matter and you haven't benefited anybody. If they were going to react, they would have done so by now. If they were going to react to any reactions. Jeannie Mai has taught us a lot. She taught us further that um, submission is a curse word to the Western black woman. And they get upset about that. I mean, they actually hate that. They demand that a man be like Jeezy, that a man be as successful as Jeezy. But they also demand that a woman not submit to him, that a woman not do what he says. But that's not the lesson I'm talking about now. The um, the lesson that she really taught us is the same as the lesson that Trump taught us. She said that black men were good as a side dish. She did not say that black men were good for much in one's main life. So pretty much she was saying while she was married to a white husband that if you want a black man, you marry a white guy and then you cheat with a black boyfriend. We didn't realize this, but she was complimenting us sexually and insulting our manhood in every other non-sexual manner. And that's what she was doing. When she finally got Jeezy, she got a black man that was financially what a man must be in the eyes of the Western woman, and therefore she changed her tune. I really believe that she plans to submit. She taught us, though, also that uh, there's no guarantee that women from that part of the world are going to be submissive. See, she said from her own mouth that her mother was not, and that drove a wedge between her mother and her father. Now, we tend to look at women from that part of the world and we so deeply associate them with submission that we even think of the epicanthal folds on a woman as being, I mean, just that is a signal to us of submission. And it's such a stereotype throughout the world that the men from that region are the least desired, as almost as if they're not men. So some have said that Asian men are in fact the world's loneliest men. And when you factor in the gender imbalance in the population in China, that's probably true. Maybe so. Because it's not because China is multiple countries, it's not because it's more than one country, but because China itself is just so big. So these small percentages are still large populations. But that's another recording for another day. What I'm going to get at here is that Jeannie Mai showed us, she showed us something in particular. Now, if you think about what she said several years ago, and then you think about the way that we responded back then think about what she's saying now and think about how we have responded. We're not saying to each other out loud she's changed her tune. We're simply forgetting about what she said previously. So I'm not really upset that she's got the support that she's got per se. I'm upset about why we're doing it. See, to go further, let's take a look at Trump. Now, Trump has twice the black male support this time around that he had last time. That's not normal. You see, this time 4 years ago, we knew the dirt on Trump. We knew bad things about Trump. And we pretty much said, no, that's not the right way to go. Matter of fact, we didn't take him seriously and we underestimated him, and he wound up winning. And I mean, the same thing happened with Bush. Bush wound up winning. We didn't really take him seriously, even though his dad had been president. We didn't wind up taking baby Bush seriously, and he wound up winning. And I understand that people want to say, well, Trump has done certain things, but Trump, I don't really know about the good that Trump has done. I've heard some rumors. I don't know that he exclusively funded HBCUs. But if what he did was good for us, then that means he exclusively funded HBCUs and did not fund anybody else. That's a sign that he was actually looking out for us. But I don't know if that's the case. I've heard, I don't know. I mean, if you really examine these legislations or executive, I shouldn't say legislation, but executive orders and things he's done, I really don't know. I mean, any health care that's been provided, he pretty much dismantled and repackaged under his own name. He's doing away with certain federal initiatives that challenge job discrimination in workplaces. And so I'm like Edward Anderson. It's interesting to see what's going to happen if he gets a second term, but it's not because I think he's a good president. And Edward Anderson was right. Edward Anderson said exactly what it is that Trump and Jeannie Mai together have taught us. Edward Anderson said it. We have a short memory. That's the lesson that he and Jeannie Mai have taught us. And they've also taught us that we ain't the worst in the world. See, Jeannie Mai said her mother did not submit to her father. Well, what trauma did her mother go through if she wouldn't listen to her father, but her father still had to be the man and pay the bills and pay the cost to be the boss? Now, if he didn't have to pay the cost, okay, fine, fair enough. But she said it drove a wedge between her mother and her father. If that's the case, then we know doggone further mucking well. Mom was trying to call shots with dad's money. Dad had to pay the cost for her to be the boss. I don't care where Mrs. Mai got that from. That drives a wedge between any woman and her husband. It drove a wedge between my first wife and I, my first ex. And now we're exes. So Jeannie Mai showed us how short our memory was. We black men now are supporting her, and it's fine that we are, but we're not saying, and what we need to do is address the fact that she said the opposite years ago. We need to address that. And if we're going to address that, then we say either she's turned over a new leaf and seen the light, or if we don't believe that she's turned over a new leaf, seen the light, and we say, hold up, she just said that this X, Y, and Z 4 years ago, or however many years ago she said it, whatever the case is. I don't even remember what year she said it. What I know is that we have to at least address the fact that she said it, and it wasn't that long ago. I think it was 2017 for some reason, or 2016. Because she said, she did say that black men were good for on the side, they're good for fun, while she was married to the white husband to whom she's no longer married. And some say, well, she didn't submit to him. And I don't know how she did or did not. I mean, it sounds like she did not. But that wasn't the issue that was brought up in the marriage. He wanted babies and she didn't. Now, usually women that look that good want babies. I know that. I've never been involved with a woman that didn't want kids. Now, I've been involved with some that didn't demand them, but I've never been involved with those that did not want them. That's never happened. They've never been interested in sex not being stressful at some point, either before, during, or after. They've always been interested in some sort of stressful outcome or precondition of sex all the time. Now, that's regardless of where they're from. It's just a hell of a lot worse when I was in the West, that's all. Men and women from outside the West, they just don't want to be cheap, but they're not necessarily trying to stress you out. They don't want to be cheap. They don't want to be objectified. And I get it. as long as they don't do the same thing. Fair enough. But Jeannie Mai did say this, and that was an insult to the non-sexual manhood of black men and a compliment or a flattery to the sexual manhood of black men. That's why a lot of us weren't really sure whether we should have been offended or not. And black women were sitting up saying, y'all should be offended. You're being fetishized. The funny thing is, though, we know that we're fetishized within the black community, too, by African American women and by black Canadian women and black British women, because see, within the community, we know the kind of guy you got to be. You got to be something that other men are afraid of. For athletic or criminal reasons, you got to be that. You got to be some sort of hyper macho negative stereotype. That's a must. There's got to be the threat of violence involved somewhere, either on an athletic field, basketball court, or of course just on street corners. And you know, the guys they want the most of the ones that are already incarcerated, ironically locked away from these ladies. But Jeannie Mai showed us how short our memories are. Now, when I say ours, I mean black men or black women. Black people got short memories, really short memories. And we need to start writing down our histories. I mean, we really do. I think every black folk should keep a journal. Everybody black should have a journal, preferably electronic, so that you can go back and just type in a search for a particular date. Because you see, Trump should not enjoy twice the support from black men. I don't mean curiosity like what Edward Anderson has. That's normal. I mean the support, even if it's only 12% of black men. He should not have twice the support of black men now that he has 4 years ago. See, Trump fits the negative stereotypes, not Barack. And I'm not even a fan of Barack Obama. There is no such thing as a black enough president for me. A black enough president will do things for us only first. Everybody else he's everybody else's president after he's taken care of us. And he's going to do things that will help us out and that will tick off other races. That would be a black enough president. They pretty much would have to shoot him. Not that I want a black enough president to be shot. I'm just saying that if he's black enough for me, they done already shot him, because that's how they are. That's what I'm getting at. So that's one lesson that they taught us. We're really, really bad about history and remembering things and learning lessons from history. But the other lesson that they both taught us is that we're not the only people that are as bad off as we are. We're just the only ones that believe other stereotypes about us being that bad off. We're not the only ones that are that bad. Think about it. Trump lives in government housing by definition. You could say that's a necessity for the job, and that's fine, but he lives in government housing. He's got babies and baby mamas. He doesn't pay his debts, and he stunts and flosses falsely. You know, always trying to front like he's more than what he is. Of course, you're going to be successful if you don't pay your debts. And I'm not just talking about taxes. I mean, even his golf resort was built by a construction company with which he's always in court. But he'll pay lawyers to tie the issue up in court so that they can't come after him for the collections. Because what he owes them is more than what he would have to pay lawyers just to keep on extending and tying things up in court. And for whatever reason, that company, because they didn't get paid any fees from him, they don't have the money to fight it in court. That's the funny thing about it, the irony of it. The irony of it. That's Trump. His cunning is somewhat in business, but his cunning is also in not paying. And that is that's the essence of how America got to be what America is. Don't pay for the land, just kill the original Americans you find on it. To cut down the trees, to build the boats, to go across the ocean, to kidnap the people, to bring back, to do the work that you're not going to pay them to do either. You take and you don't pay. Because there's nobody around with a gun to your head to make you pay. That's how you can, anybody could get rich in a case like that. If there are no cops to stop you and you're the one with the gun and you got the drop on everybody, of course you can get rich. I mean, there were no international police at that time. There you go. And Trump is doing exactly what Trump knows America got to be what she is this way. And Trump got to be the same way. And he learned from his grandfather, Drumpf. That was his grandfather's name. A German immigrant to the United States who got rich by renting out properties he didn't even own to people. And when he would get caught, he'd flee and go to another town. And eventually he wound up getting picked up. And I think he fled back to Germany, actually, because he ran out of places to go to do this stuff. So then he wound up going back to Germany. But then in Germany, they knew he was a naturalized U.S. citizen. So they deported him and said, you can't stay here. You're not a citizen. You got no right. Fit the guck out. And they sent him back to and I think he stayed in New York that time. He had no interest in going to the northwestern United States where he had run all these scams and fraud before. Somehow he made a fortune again, left it to his son, and that was Trump's dad. And Trump even said he took out a small loan of $1 million. Trump said something about, I love the Bible. I like to read it every day. And they read something to him that wasn't in the Bible, and he agreed with it. Or it was somehow they find out that he didn't actually read the Bible. Whatever the case was, that's the truth of the matter. He didn't read it, but he said it. See, we forget all these bad things that we knew about Trump. And now we're looking back and saying, oh, I was asleep. I was brainwashed. Trump's the best. No, he isn't. And by the way, Cube didn't sell out. Cube showed a contract and let each one give their reaction, and the Democrats' reaction was worse than the Republicans. That's what wound up happening. Cube's not a sellout. He should be wearing a red hat. Instead of saying make America great again, he should be wearing a red hat that says, I was trying to help your dumb ass. That's what he should be wearing. And see, Cube had to go through this before. He got bused to school. They called him a sellout. He stopped banging and went to rapping. They called him a sellout. He went into acting. They called him a sellout. Every time he moves up professionally, they call him a sellout. That's what he's got to deal with. So this time he comes along and he says, here's a contract with Black America. Take a look at it. And neither one has the reaction that we deserve, but we didn't expect it anyway. But the Democrats' reaction was worse. He never endorsed any party, and he said, I'm not endorsing either one. I'm presenting a contract. And what did we do? Oh, he's a coon. Now we got false memes circulating. Because we don't learn from history. And we keep thinking and believing the hype that we are the worst people in the world, and we're not. Jeannie Mai also said that her mother was not submissive. So in other words, dad had to pay the cost for mom to be the boss. That sounds like some sugar knit if I've ever heard any. And yes, that was a spoonerism that I just gave y'all. So Trump, man, I'm sorry, but Trump and Jeannie Mai both have shown, or they've relayed to us, either they've proven in the case of Trump, like demonstrating the dysfunction of their people, or pointed out to us the dysfunction of their people, i.e. what Jeannie Mai did. Jeannie Mai she wasn't dysfunctional, she just pointed it out. And both of the dysfunctions, all these dysfunctions are things that are associated with us, not only in the minds of white supremacists, but even in our own minds. We associate these things with us. Renting out a property to someone and collecting the rent money for a property you don't own. That sounds like something that we think one of our own would do that. That's when we think of ourselves. That's how we are. That's the way we act. I mean, that's the way we think of ourselves. So turns out that's what Trump's granddad did in northwestern United States at that time. And that's before he went back to Germany and then got deported from Germany to the States because he was naturalized. That's before that point. So his granddad was a crook, and that's how they got where they are. That's how they got this start. And Trump is keeping that up because he ain't that slick. But hey, look, get something built, don't pay the fees, and tie it up in court because that costs less money. Yeah, of course you're going to be rich. You got a golf resort and you never paid to have it built. Yeah, of course I'd be rich then if that was the case. So yeah, they taught us this, and I'm going to speak to, I've already talked about the dysfunction of other people. I uploaded that this morning, my time, which was late last night, you all's time, about the student that tried to sneak a cell phone in, and I found out something was wrong. So he decided to go back, and this time he had the cell phone hidden somewhere else, and He pulled it out inside the testing area, but they were looking at him. They caught him because they knew something was fishy, because I told them. And he was on that BS. If you are mad at black people for our dysfunction, and you have every right to be upset about it, but if you were upset with us for our dysfunction, you would hate these folks out here. You would hate Arabs in general, be they Mediterranean or Gulf Arabs. Because with the exception of Yemen, all Arabs are either Mediterranean or Gulf, pretty much throughout, not counting the Sudanese. So if you are, it really doesn't matter. You get up, you start to get upset with them here because they'll talk that religious stuff with you. Got the nerve to ask me why my parents ain't Muslim, and then of course on test day, the same one asking me that is trying to sneak a peek at his neighbor's paper, and will fight his neighbor if he calls his neighbor's name and his neighbor doesn't help out. Then he wants to fight him. That's worse than what we do. I mean, you look at our teenagers in the schools, if they're too lazy to study, at least they're too lazy to care about their grades. So they cheating's not that bad. Man, here you got to really squash it. These cats cheat their way through life. They don't stop in university or adulthood. Now they're beginning, and now it's on the decrease. Now it's very, very, very rare. Now it is, but that's been within the last 2.5 years that we've seen these changes. Previously, no, most people. It was so common that if you tell people you never cheated in your own educational career, they would think you were lying. I still have students that can't believe I didn't cheat in high school and middle school. They can believe I didn't do it in university. But then 2 years ago, my students couldn't believe that I didn't cheat even in the university. They can't believe it. Or they couldn't 2 years ago. Now, this new crop of students is a little bit different, but that's how bad the dysfunction is amongst other people. And we're sitting up here dumb enough to think it's just us. It's just us. It's only us. And then on top of that, we got such short memories for recent history. You definitely can't expect us to know our ancient history. And we get that wrong and got the nerve to put up all these memes with false information. People now were talking about Cleopatra could not have looked like Gail Gadot. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing her name. Actually, we don't know what Cleopatra looked like. We know her father was Greek. We don't know what her mother was. The Greeks were ruling Egypt at that time. She was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, which was Greeks ruling Egypt. This was after they conquered Egypt. She was part of that dynasty. She was a descendant of Ptolemy, who was one of Alexander's generals. Now, if you want to know the real history, we don't know her mother's origin, but we do know that at that time in Egyptian history, marriages between the Greeks that were ruling Egypt and between the native Egyptians were forbidden. They were illegal. People still did it sometimes, but for the most part, these marriages were illegal. So we might try to say, well, she was mixed. Yeah, maybe, but very unlikely. Now, I didn't hear about rules prohibiting marriages between Greeks and other non-Africans that might have been in that area. It was between Greeks and native Egyptians. That's the prohibition of which I'm aware. So the chances are Cleopatra was not actually black. It's good that we're proud. It's good that we don't let them claim everybody. But see, we're mixing things up. Nefertiti, also referred to as Nefertari, was clearly black. And that bust of her that they have in the museum in France that we've all seen the image of is not guaranteed to be her. But there's another drawing of her on some of the walls. And that's a black woman, and she's referred to as Nefertari. That's a sister. Prognathous, big lips, wide nose, 4C hair. If she were alive today, she'd be screaming about colorism. That's a sister. That's a black woman. And see, when you know the history, people can't make a fool out of you. You make a fool out of people for trying. So if we really knew it, we would say to them, why don't you make a movie about Nefertari instead of Cleopatra? Then we could call them on it. We'd still be able to stand up for ourselves. We just have more grounds to do it. You don't know your history, you start making assertions you can't prove, and then they can yank a rug out from under your feet and have you looking stupid, falling in the mud. That's our problem. Because we don't learn the history, and then we want to start arguing about it and asserting it. We can't remember why we knew that Trump was not worth the office nor was Hillary for that matter, 4 years ago. We done already forgot. We done already forgot why we weren't supporting Jeannie Mai 4 years ago. But then we want to argue with each other about what's going on in the past. Like we're going to use that to teach each other so that we can liberate each other. And yeah, that's right. Arabs didn't even conquer Egypt until well afterwards. Matter of fact, I'm trying to remember, did Alexander die in 330 BC? Was it 333 or was it? I think it was 333 BC. So yeah, that would put her at a not too long before the birth of Jesus, peace be to him. And so yeah, that adds up. That does add up. The Arabs didn't get into Egypt. They didn't get into Egypt until a relatively recent history, actually. Because the one that opened up Egypt for the Islamic Empire, that was Amr. I forgot his last name. May Allah be pleased with him. And he had stuff to say about the Egyptian people back at that time. And even by then, they had already been mixed up. By that point, they had been mixed. So when we sit up and say, well, the Arabs went into Egypt and started conquering Africa from there, well, we're trying to say is that the Arabs went in and started conquering black people. By that point, the Egyptians were a mixed lot. At that point, they were. Because if you want to blame the Egyptians for not being black, that started well before the Arabs got in there. And the Arabs really weren't going in to conquer it because it was black. They didn't do that to Ethiopia, which is blacker. They didn't do it to Somalia, which is even blacker. They went in largely because they were invited by the Unitarian Christians to come in and liberate them, to liberate them from the Trinitarian European Christians. That's why they went in. They were invited, actually. People who didn't say that Jesus was God, the Son of God, were being persecuted by other Christians that said, no, you have to worship him as God, the Son of God. And by that point, this was after the Nicaea Council. This was after that. So they were trying to get them to make images of Jesus too. By that point, they already had white images of white Jesus. Now, it's not the same as the ones we have seen today, but they did have these European images of Jesus they were pushing on people. And so, yeah, the Muslims went in and overthrew them. And they're still Egyptian Christians to this day. They obviously were not forced to convert. And you know me, I don't let Arabs off the hook for nothing that they've done, but this ain't something for which they've been guilty. And as a matter of fact, it was when they got a hold of Egypt, there was an Egyptian who was not black, and he had to have a conversation with one of the black Arabs, and he told them, please stand between me and him. I'm afraid of him, or something like that. And then he told the black Arab, this is an Egyptian talking to the black Arab. He said, well, because they told him he was the leader. So he said, well, please talk softly because your blackness scares me. And that man said, if my blackness scares you, then you should see my tribe. They're blacker than me. And some of them can fight better than me too. But the real reason you should be afraid of me is because I'm only afraid of God. Something along those lines. The point I'm making is that the Egyptian that had to eventually meet and negotiate terms of surrender had to meet with a black Arab. Now, if we knew the history and if we just put the shuck up and read before we started talking and making these memes and then circulating, repeating other people's memes as though they're facts, we would have a much clearer picture of what we're dealing with. We don't. We are linguistically, emotionally, audially, and historically illiterate. And that is what Jeannie Mai and Donald Trump have shown us. I can't even blame them necessarily. I mean, I can blame Trump, sure, I just did. But even Jeannie Mai, I don't have any malice towards her. Yet she showed this. She showed us this about ourselves. And she also showed us that her people are not guaranteed to have all their stuff together. And we know because, see, we look at Asians as one block and they're not. That's not the case. The Vietnamese may not have any problems with the Thai. The Cambodians and the Laotians may not hate each other. They're different people, but they may not hate each other. And that's good. But understand that those particular ones are not friends with the Koreans and the Chinese. Now, we just look and see Asians and we think, oh, you give them a bowl of rice and they got a restaurant within 10 hours. That's not the case. There is no other ethnic group that just you hand them something and everything just grows and prospers from there. And then you put something in a black hand and it shrivels up. That's not the way it works, culturally nor financially. And so she showed us that some of that effery and dysfunction is sometimes it's there amongst her people too. And I don't care why her mother didn't submit. If dad paid the cost, I got a problem with her mother. But she looked and recognized it and said that I'm not carrying that stuff forward. That's where she has distinguished herself from black folk. But even then, not all black folk, because most of you under the sound of my voice right now are listening because you've determined in your minds you're not going to pass forward to the next generations any foolishness and effery just because mama and grandma did it or daddy and granddad did it. It's a part of our culture to beat the living daylights out of our kids for minor infractions in the name of serious discipline. And granted, it's good that we're not too lax and too lenient, culturally speaking, with our kids. That's not our problem. Our problem is we're too far in the opposite direction. You better not even look at that candy when we get into the store. And we're ready to beat the snot out of our kids in front of everybody when they call our name. Daddy, smack. Mama, smack. We brag about that, but that's an extreme. So we have every right to turn around and start saying nasty things to Europeans because they let their little rugrats run wild in these stores and public places. We got every right to do that, but we don't necessarily, as much of right as we have to do that, we have to admit we got things that we can't be passing forward to these future generations. And most of you are listening to me now because you decided I'm not going to do it. I'm not participating in that. So, hey, look, that's great. But I'm talking about the majority of our people. So I think I got the point across, and I want to thank you all for joining in. Assalamu alaikum, Abdullah bin Bobby. I do appreciate that, and you all have contributed to my knowledge too. Ayla Rue, Marhaba Sayed, you've helped me with getting my date straight. Thank you too, Drolix. And I hope that what I've said, has helped. Oh, yes, Drolix. It's funny how we are all look the same. Trust me, all Asians can tell apart which Asian is from where in Asia. And Drolix, before I go, I'm gonna ask y'all something, man. I want to ask you this. How do the Cambodians and Laotians and the Vietnamese and the Thai, how do they get along with each other? I'm not asking how they get along with the Chinese and the Koreans, but how do they tend to get along with each other for the most part? These nationalities. I'll give you time to type an answer in. Before I go, I'll give you time to type it. Okay, all right. So y'all get along fine for the most part. Now, how do the Chinese and the Koreans treat you all, and why? We might do a live stream about this one day, but in the meantime, I'll give you a chance to type it in, because I won't be on here much longer, but I'll give you time to type it. I want to know how it is that they treat you and why. And I'm asking for the benefit of my audience. To see, to answer your question, I don't know about dirhams in Malaysia, to be honest. I wasn't told anything about it. I know the currency is the ringgit, but I didn't hear anybody mention anything about dirhams. I know that there's some countries that are trying to bring units that they call dirhams, and I don't know what they all have in common or what the differences is. I've just heard about some other countries doing that, using some currency called the dirham alongside their own, but I don't know if they all match each other or what. And if they do, I don't know what the exchange rate is between it and the other currencies. Um, last time I heard about that gentleman, Abdullah, was last time I heard about him was when I was doing my live stream where you were on that other time. Okay. All right. So, Dralex, you said that there's a hierarchy. So in this hierarchy, then, is it the paler ones that are at the top? Is that how it works? The whiter skins you are, the higher up you are? Or is there a different hierarchy to it? Is it just based on the strength of the country's economy? And again, I'm asking for the benefit of my people because some of us tend to think everybody else except us has their stuff together. And some of us, we just see the epicanthal fold and we start thinking of a super functional culture that can never be uprooted by white supremacy or imperialism. That's how a lot of us tend to look and view it. Even a lot of my own folks don't really know how to relate because we a lot of us tend to think of Asian as just Asian. So tell me what the hierarchy or who's at the top of the hierarchy would it, if you have the time. Okay. Okay, so what's all of it then? I see. All right. Listen, Drolix, I may one day ask more questions. And if you ever want to explain it, then you're welcome to schedule a live stream with me. And we would do that. Now, I will admit, if you do agree to it, I would be doing it for a different, maybe for a different reason. I would be willing to let you come on and tell us about this hierarchy because I want my people to benefit and to understand how international white supremacy is, but also how it's affected other groups outside of ourselves. Largely so that we would understand that we're not the most dysfunctional people on the planet like we like to think. I shouldn't say we like to think, but that's how many of us do tend to think. Um, okay, yeah. Okay, so the more southeast you go, the more bottom tier it is. And the funny thing is that the further southeast you go, the less hostile they are to black people. Have you noticed that? Because the countries you named that are third tier, also the countries where black people can travel with the least hostility. Now, they may not be where we can earn the most money if we work, but that's when we can go with the least hostility. Have you noticed that? Okay, I see. So, my audience, you've now seen from somebody else. Art Zuck told us about it in other live streams, and now we got Drolix telling us about something similar. So, when it comes to the dysfunctions, I'm not going to ask him to tell on us folks like that, but we do see that at the very least, everybody's not more united than us. And that the more of resemblance to us people have and the less hostile they are towards us, the more hostile their neighbors get towards them. So, yep, Red Sith Lord confirms it. All right, folks, I hope that what I've said has been a benefit. And when I say that, I mean I hope that we start to write down personal histories for the sake of our memories and what we can tell our kids, and also that we start becoming more historically literate by simply fudding the shuck up when we don't know something and reading. It doesn't mean you got to trust everything every white man says. Chancellor Williams did not have his stuff together when he started talking about the underdevelopment of Africa. See, when Chancellor Williams talked about what Europe did, he was correct. He was using European sources and he was correct. He started talking about what the Arabs did to Africa. And mind you, I'll tell you, these folks don't have their stuff together. So, I don't exonerate Arabs just because they're Arab. I don't have a loyalty to them for being Arab. But to tell the truth and not blame people for things they didn't do, as I've always said, He didn't have his stuff together. He used French colonial records for the most part to talk about what the Arabs did in Africa. Do you trust the French or the British to tell the truth about the Arabs? They're not going to do that. So, just as an example. Um, thank you all for listening. Blackest hearted, blackest minded, blackest man, black out. Assalamu alaikum.